I want to welcome everybody who's here in person. Thank you so much for being here on our beautiful-ish afternoon to talk all things Utopia Limited. Just a little housekeeping note before we get started is, as you may know, we're filming this and releasing the video this Friday for everybody who couldn't be here in person. And so if you have to get up during the presentation, if you could just go out the sides instead of the middle, so we have a nice clear view of the for the cameras. So thank you. As you may know, I'm Hannah Holmes, and I'm NYGASP's new-ish education manager. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be, presenting this patron education course to sort of hopefully be the beginning of a long and ongoing series where we do deep dives into Gilbert and Sullivan, which we all love so much. I want to take a moment to introduce the performers who are sharing their time with us today, performers from Utopia Limited. We have Vince Gover. Thank you, Vince. We have Lance Olds, Matthew Wages, and of course, our esteemed artistic director and director of Utopia Limited, James Mills. Yeah. So let's talk about Utopia Limited. So the show premiered on October 7th of 1893, and it ran for 245 performances. This was a little bit of a disappointment for Gilbert and Sullivan. Their longest-running show was The Mikado with 672 performances, and the shortest was the final show, the last show after this, which was The Grand Duke, which only played 123. It was a very extravagant production, in fact, the most extravagant of the Savoy operas. It cost £7,000 to mount, which is the equivalent of about $1 million today. And the reasons for this were many. There's a very large cast, many different principal roles to cast, and there's a rather elaborate drawing room sequence in the second act that necessitates that many of the characters have two costumes, and the second one is Victorian finery. So we have all of these roles and all extravagantly costumed. Also, in the original production, there was a great amount of incandescent lighting used, which at the time, brought the cost up and was very impressive. The reception at the time was mixed. As you may have noted from our promotional materials, George Bernard Shaw particularly enjoyed the score. And there was, in general, great enthusiasm for the return of Gilbert and Sullivan's collaboration after a 4-year hiatus, which I will speak about in a minute. To quote Leslie Eyre, he wrote, "Not the least cause of the audience's pleasure on the first night of Utopia was the sight of Gilbert and Sullivan standing side by side on stage at the Savoy at the end of the performance and warmly shaking hands. There had been much to enjoy in this latest elaborately staged piece." Now, as you may know, it's not often revived. I mean, many Gilbert and Sullivan fans don't even know it particularly well. And that's because it's so difficult with the large cast, with the great expense that it costs to produce it. And it's just not as well known as other shows. The D'Oyly Carte Company actually only toured it, I think, once and revived it once in the 70s for a weekend. So I think it sort of became like a self-perpetuating loop where people don't know it, so it's not done, so people don't know it, And so I'm excited to be hopefully reintroducing this show, with a full production to our New York City audience. Do you have anything to say about that, James?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. For that same reason, NYGASP has not done the production in the same capacity either. We've done it twice before, but only as a concert or a semi-staged concert. So this is the very first time that NYGASP audiences will be seeing a fully staged production of Utopia Limited, and that's what makes me the most excited about it. I was actually in the production 15 years ago. I played a very small role, but a very explosive one. Tarara, the public exploder, as in Tarara Boom Die. which was a very popular song of the time. I'm sure that's coming up later. But that was my part. And I remember having so much fun with the show, but it was very heavily edited and things were changed. So what we're presenting is much more the actual show that the Victorian audiences saw, that George Bernard Shaw loved. And I'm really falling in love with it, so I think you will too.
Thank you, James. Let's talk a little bit about the historical context of the show, not only in the partnership of Gilbert and Sullivan, but also in the world. So this was 4 years after Gondoliers it premiered, and the reason for that gap was something called the infamous carpet quarrel, some of you may know about. Essentially, after Gondoliers, D'Oyly Carte took the profits of the show and he, before splitting it with Gilbert and Sullivan, paid for new carpets at the Savoy Theater. And this offended Gilbert greatly. He was so incensed that he ended up suing D'Oyly Carte, actually. And I think it was more a symptom of how he felt like he didn't have financial control over how things were going, more than than it was really about that specific, number of, pounds for the carpets. And also at this time, Sullivan, had ambitions to be a grand opera composer, and he sort of felt like the Gilbert and Sullivan, partnership was not beneath him, but secondary to his grand ambitions of being a grand opera composer. And so in this gap, in this time of the carpet quarrel, D'Oyly Carte was actually producing, not only producing, but building a new theater for Sullivan's grand opera Ivanhoe. And so in the dispute between Gilbert and D'Oyly Carte, Sullivan sided with Carte for obvious reasons. So that further fractured the partnership between Gilbert and Sullivan. And Gilbert ended up winning the settlement for the carpets in court, but at what cost, And as I said earlier, this was their penultimate collaboration. Their only further collaboration was the Grand Duke, which is sometimes maligned, I would say. This Utopia is maybe their, last. Yeah, please, James.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to that fracturing. Gilbert definitely could hold a grudge. He was known for holding grudges. And that you said that this is one of the larger casts. Well, those large casts started with the Gondoliers. And if you know the Gondoliers well, it's essentially two shows in one. You have the Palmieris, the Venetians, and you have the Plaza Toros from Spain. It's almost like two different shows, and they get sort of sandwiched together, and it doesn't resolve until the end. Well, that was done specifically because Gilbert had a grudge that the actors felt so empowered by their popularity that they wanted bigger and bigger parts. So instead of giving them bigger parts, he wrote more parts for more actors, therefore making the bigger parts get smaller. That has continued with Utopia Limited, and it really goes off the rails with the Grand Duke. It's just too big.
Thank you, James. And then I wanted to talk about the main thrust of the satire of Utopia Limited, as we can kind of infer from the title, is something called the Joint Stock Company Act of 1862. Mouthful. And in fact, it features heavily in the finale of Act 1. The whole chorus sings about the Joint Stock Company Act of 1862. Essentially, this was an act of parliament that established and strengthened the principle of limited liability companies. That you have 7 men who could come together and create this company, and the limited liability meaning that if the company failed, then they wouldn't have personal liability against their debtors, right? So declaring bankruptcy and not having to pay back all the capital. And essentially, this is Gilbert satirizing the uncontrolled spread of commercialization and speculative capitalism in particular. This act really spurred financial speculation. And I think a case can be made that this act sort of brings us to where we are in the current day, where we have corporations that are people, right? This is the beginning of that. Do you have anything on that? People are corporations.
In this show, corporations are people, and then people become corporations. Yeah.
Right. Isn't there a line like, there's not one babe in Utopia who hasn't already issued his little prospectus for his own little limited liability company? So let's talk about the characters of this show. We'll start with the Utopians. We have King Paramount, who is played by the venerable Matthew Wages, called a despot tempered by dynamite, which I'll explain. It's a bass baritone role, and it was originated by Rutland Barrington, who was a mainstay at the Savoy, and also notably originated Pooh Bah in the Mikado. So you can kind of think there's shades of Pooh Bah, perhaps, right, Matthew, in your performance. And he's the supreme leader of Utopia, but with some drawbacks that I'll get to. His eldest daughter is Princess Zara, who he has sent away to England to become an English lady. And she's specifically at Girton, which was the Women's College of Cambridge. And on the day that the action begins, she is coming home. It's a very high tessitura soprano part. It's very impressive vocally. And I think that it may have been a topical reference that Gilbert was making. At the time, in 1893, Princess Kaulani of Hawaii was actually studying in England. So we sort of have this contemporaneous princess from an island nation off studying to bring England home. Oh, yeah.
Just a fun little tidbit about Princess Zara. It is the only role in its original run that was played by an American. It was written for a soprano who was an American actress that debuted in London in the production. Little fun tidbit.
We love tidbits. Then we have the two younger daughters, the princesses Kaliba and Nikaya. Of Native Maids the Cream is their duet. They are the perfect embodiment of British daughters, and they're being taught by an English governess, more on her later, to be ridiculously demure. Then we have our villains of the piece. We have Scaphio and Phantis, our twin, well, not twin, but dual patter baritone roles, played by Vince Gover and Lance Olds. And they are the wise men, or the judges of the Utopian Supreme Court. And they're not great guys. They're, in fact, blackmailing the king. They're in love with his daughter, notably Princess Zara, and they are the power behind the throne. In fact, they're blackmailing the king into writing a scurrilous newspaper about himself called the Palace Peeper. And they end up resisting the flowers of progress that come later, but selfishly, I would say. They're pretty selfish characters. And their threats over the king would be enforced by a character called Tarara. As James mentioned, there's sort of an implied boom-die at the end of that name. And that's because Tarara is the public exploder. His duty is, if the king is caught doing anything untoward, to blow him up with dynamite. Now, there are shades of Coco from the Mikado in this character, in that Coco was afraid of beheading and needed to practice. And Tarara goes around practicing not with dynamite, but with crackers, like Christmas crackers. Pop! And he's terrified, but he's working on it. And then let's talk about the British characters bringing England to Utopia. So the Lady Sophy is my role, in fact. It's the contralto role in this show. And she is the imported English governess to the two younger daughters of the king. And I think an interesting historical fact is that around the time Anna Leonowens of The King and I was in the zeitgeist. So you have this idea, and it was some years earlier, but she was still, very much a public figure. And so I think there's maybe some inspiration that Gilbert had with this English governess coming to this island nation to, not that Siam's not an island nation, but you know what I mean. And I think, as a person who plays a lot of these contralto roles, and I find it very interesting to think about, did Gilbert hate older women, right? Is that, they're so unfairly portrayed, right? And there's some interesting correspondence about this older female role that Gilbert and Sullivan had. So if you'll permit me, I'll read a little bit from their correspondence about Lady Sophy. So Sullivan wrote to Gilbert, If this is to be an old or middle-aged woman in the piece at all, is it necessary that she should be very old, ugly, raddled, and perhaps grotesque? And still more, is it necessary that she should be seething with love and passion and other feelings not associated with old age? I thought that Cadishaw was to be the last example of that type. Gilbert wrote back, she may be and should be a dignified lady of 45 or thereabouts, and no more ugly than God Almighty has made the lady who is to play the part. We got some wit from Gilbert, not surprising. But being compelled by her duties as governess to the young princesses to impose upon herself a restraint, an appearance of prudishness which is foreign to her nature. So she's a woman torn between her passions in her heart and her over-the-top prudishness. And she was originally played by Rosina Brandrum, who originated the role of Cadishaw. So you might remember her from the prologue of The Mikado in our version. And at this time, I'd love to sing for you. This is Lady Sophy's Act 1 solo number. This is the first that we see of her on stage. And in this number, she is presenting a lesson to everybody in Utopia about how English courtship rituals should go. And I do hope you'll forgive me. I have a slight cold, so I'll do my best. But yes, I have a slight cold, but I'm otherwise quite well. This morning we propose to illustrate a course of maiden courtship from the start to the triumphant matrimonial finish. Bold-faced ranger, perfect stranger, meets two well-behaved young ladies. He's attractive, young and active, each a little bit afraidies. Youth advances at his glances, to their danger they awaken. They repel him as they tell him he is very much mistaken, very, very much mistaken. Though they speak to him politely, please observe their sneering slightly, just to show he's acting vainly. This is virtue saying plainly, go away, young bachelor, we are not what you take us for. When addressed impertinently, English ladies answer gently, go away, young bachelor, we are not what you take us for.
English ladies answer gently, when addressed impertinently, go away, young bachelor, we are not what you take us for.
As he gazes, hat he raises, enters into conversation, makes excuses. This produces interesting agitation. He with daring, undespairing, gives his card, his rank discloses. Little heeding this proceeding, they turn up their little noses. Yes, their little noses. Pray observe this lesson vital. When a man of rank or title his position first discloses, always cock your little noses. When at home, let all the class try this in the looking glass. English girls of well-bred notions shun all unrehearsed emotions. English girls of highest class practice them before the glass.
English girls of well-bred notions shun all unrehearsed emotions. English girls of highest class practice them before the glass.
his intentions. Then he mentions something definite to go on, makes recitals of his titles, hints at settlements and so on. Smiling sweetly, they discreetly ask for further evidences. Thus invited, he delighted, gives the usual references. Don't forget the references. This is business, each is fluttered when the offer's fairly uttered. Which of them has his affection? He declines to make selection. Do they quarrel for his dross? Not a bit of it, they toss. Oh, please observe this cogent moral. English ladies never quarrel. When a doubt they come across, English ladies always toss.
Observe this cogent moral. English ladies never quarrel. When a doubt they come across, English ladies always toss.
The lecture's ended in 10 minutes space. 'Twill be repeated in the marketplace. And thank you to my ersatz backup chorus there. All right, continuing with more of the British characters. We have the Flowers of Progress. So this is actually the subtitle of this show, Utopia Limited, or The Flowers of Progress. Now these are British gentlemen who are brought by the eldest princess, Princess Zara, back from England when she returns. And they each are an opportunity for Gilbert to point his satire at a different facet of British society. So first we have Captain Fitzbattleaxe of the 1st Life Guards, and he represents the army. And he also has a romance with Princess Zara. And the role features a very amusing aria in the 2nd act that's very self-deprecating about tenors. So look out for Cameron Smith singing that. Then we have Sir Bailey Barr, QC, which stands for Queen's Consul, and he represents the law. And Zara introduces him thus. He's an eminent logician who can make it clear to you that black is white when looked at from the proper point of view. A marvelous philologist who'll undertake to show that yes is but another and a neater form of no. So he's twisting his words around, right? And a bit of a liar, perhaps, in service of the law. Then we have Lord Romilly, a British Lord Chamberlain. Now, this is a character, a person in real life that Gilbert had actual beef with because he was the censor for plays in Britain. That was one of his duties. And in fact, that was a duty of that position until 1968, which is later than I would have thought. And in fact, a character of the Lord Chamberlain appears in The Grand Duke for even further needling from Gilbert. Zara introduces him. This is a Lord High Chamberlain of purity the gauge. He'll cleanse our court from moral stain and purify our stage. Then we have Mr. Blushington of the County Council. Now this is also kind of a topical reference from Gilbert because the Local Government Act of 1888, not so long before this, had established county councils. So he's a parody, a satire of a local politician. Zara sings, all streets and squares he'll purify within your city walls and keep meanwhile a modest eye on wicked music halls. And then we have Mr. Goldberry, I think, from whom the main thrust of the satire comes in this show because he introduces the concept of limited liability to Utopia. He's a company promoter, which I think is the equivalent of today's private equity man or maybe venture capitalist. He sings no schemes too great or small for companification. And he, in fact, in the 1st act has an entire number that in detail describes the process of forming and valuing a limited liability company. To sing, or not to sing, but to read a little from it. Some 7 men form an association, if possible, all peers and baronets, to start off with a public declaration to what extent they mean to pay their debts. later on, when it's left for you to say what amount you mean to pay, why, the lower you can put it at, the better. Right, so we're undervaluing our companies so that when it's time to pay our debtors, we don't have to. Mr. Goldberry and Lord Dromelay also are slightly larger parts than the other flowers because they have an Act 2 romance with the younger princesses. And finally, we have Sir Captain Corcoran, KCB. And he represents the Navy, obviously. I think it's less of a satirical role and more of a fun throwback to HMS Pinafore. In fact, the Act 1 finale also features a wholesale quote from HMS Pinafore, "What never, well, hardly ever, giving 3 cheers." And it's really, I mean, it's very fun. Although, as a person who's singing it, I'll note that Sullivan wrote slightly different harmony parts in this reprise, and why, sir? So I'm having fun learning that. Let's go through just a brief overview of the plot of the show. I suppose the character descriptions have given you a little bit of a taste, but oh yes, it's important to mention, I think this is funny. So George Bernard Shaw did enjoy the score, he enjoyed the show, and he enjoyed the plot. And he said it thus. He said, "The book has Mr. Gilbert's lighter qualities without his faults. There is happily no plot, and the stage business is fresh and well invented." So I don't know that I would agree that there's no plot, but it's true that I think the focus of the piece is more on the satire than it is on a very complicated plot. And I think that just creates more work for the actors to really find their characters and make their characters grow without it being explicitly set out in the score. So for me, I feel like that's a really fun challenge. Yeah? Yeah, he agrees. And throughout, there are a number of romantic subplots, but it is secondary to the satire, I think. The satire is the main focus. GNS scholar Andrew Crowther says, "Utopia Limited is really a series of linked satirical scenes on the theme of England and its institutions. There is comparatively little need for a connected plot because it is really beside the point. The point is for Gilbert to tell his audience, this is what you are." So Act 1 starts, and we have Scaphio and Phantis blackmailing the king, forcing him to write this newspaper, the Palace Peeper. And the king is this despot tempered by dynamite, right? If he does anything, if the Palace Peeper, for example, is read by anybody, if it's disseminated, he might get blown up. So he writes the paper, and then he has all of his emissaries, his minions, go out and buy it up so nobody can find it. And I'd love to have Scaphio and Phantis, our patter baritones, sing one of their earliest numbers in the piece. It's called "Let All Your Doubts Take Wing." And do you want to talk at all about what's happening? There's no pressure. You know.
Sure. So I am madly smitten, my character, with Zara, princess, and found out, of course, that she is coming back to Utopia today, and have been pining away. Of course, my character is 55 years of age, and Zara is, what, maybe 18 or something like that. So there are overtones with some of the current issues at hand here. Anyway, of course, my good fellow wise man promises to back me in my suit, and since we have power over the king, it should work out quite well for me. So I've just found out that Scaphio is going to back my suit, and we're going to pressure the king by threat of dynamite to let him marry his daughter.
Let all your doubts take wing, our influence is great. If Paramount our king presume to hesitate, put on the screw and caution him that he will rue disaster grim that must ensue to life and limb should he poo-poo this harmless whim.
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 It is, as you say, a harmless whim, a harmless whim. Observe this dance, which I employ, when I by chance go mad with joy. What sentiment does this express? What sentiment does this express? Supreme content and happiness, of course it does, of course it does. Supreme content and happiness, of course it does, of course it does. It's happiness. Your friendly aid conferred, I need no longer pine. I've but to speak the word, and lo, the maid is mine. I do not choose to be denied, or wish to lose a lovely bride. If to choose, then woe betide, then woe betide, then woe betide, woe betide,
Then woe betide.
then woe betide. The royal shoes, then woe betide, then woe betide.
This step to use, I condescend, whene'er I choose to serve a friend. What it implies, now try to guess. What it implies, now try to guess.
Of course it does, of course it does. It typifies unselfishness. Of course it does, of course it does. Unselfishness.
And that was just a taste of one of many comedic dance sequences that are written into this score. Yet to be choreographed, so I'm very impressed with our friends here.
I just want to add to that, very well done. We just started rehearsals like a week ago. So I wasn't going to be able to be here when this was scheduled because we had a rehearsal planned for the same exact time with a rehearsal this evening, but we moved some things around because I really wanted to be here, and so that was a really great thing. Well done. We haven't even blocked that number yet, so kudos. I just thought that another thing that's really funny about that number is it's essentially making fun of things like modern interpretive dance that were coming into popularity at the time. Well, they're expressing their feelings through dance, and the other one's watching him trying to figure out what it is, and then he says, it means this. Oh, of course it does, because no one really understands interpretive dance, right? It comes back in a really fun encore in Act 2, but I don't want to give that one away.
Right, I have the stage directions. It says, Phantis continues his dance while Scaphio vainly endeavors to discover its meaning. So it's supposed to be inscrutable. So Utopia is in the process of becoming anglicized. The king desires nothing more than for his island of Utopia to be a little England. He has his Princess Zara, his older daughter, at Girton, and Lady Sophy, the imported governess, with his younger daughters. He's also outlawed the Utopian language entirely. We have shades of a romantic subplot between Lady Sophy and the king. And Lady Sophy is in love with the king, but she has gotten her hands on a copy of the Palace Peeper. And she is so scandalized by it that she can't possibly descend from her high status of respectability and, love the king. So Princess Zara returns from England, and she brings the Flowers of Progress, who set about changing Utopia into a little England. There's also the romantic subplot of Zara's romance with Fitzbattleaxe, who is the army man, and Scaphio and Phantis falling in love with her, and Captain Fitzbattleaxe outwits them. And that romantic subplot is sort of dropped after that. They give up. So King Paramount is completely inspired by the Flowers of Progress and decides to incorporate Utopia as a limited liability company itself, as a country. And then in Act 2, we see that Utopia has been transformed. The king has a song with the Flowers of Progress that talks about how much they've changed everything, called Society Has Quite Forsaken All Her Wicked Courses. Now, this was originally a parody of a minstrel number, but we have changed it to be a parody of a music hall number. I don't know if you have anything to say about how you're going to be staging.
Sure. Music hall was just as popular at the time, and much like what we've done with our production of The Mikado, and we've taken it into the 21st century through a lens that respects the material and presents it in an authentic way. We've done that with this one number. There's nothing about the number that suggests anything about the practice of minstrelsy, other than a couple of lines about saying that it's in the vein of the St. James Theatre, which was a popular minstrel house in London. So we've actually put in just a fun little tweak to the script, and you replaced that with the Palace Theatre. And the Palace Theater was what eventually became called the big theater that D'Oyly Carte built for Ivanhoe, that big opera house, and it didn't go so well. It became a music hall house. So that's a fun little inside joke for all of us Gilbert and Sullivan nerds.
Yep, that's me. So then we come to the drawing room scene, which it was part of the great expense of this production, in that it's an elaborate recreation of Queen Victoria's drawing room. So all the characters parade, and the king is quite pleased with this anglicization of his courtroom. And it's supposed to be a one-to-one recreation of Queen Victoria's courtroom, except, as one character notes, with the addition of a cup of tea and a plate of mixed biscuits, which is also pretty timely, as the most popular digestive biscuit company had just introduced the biscuits a year before, in 1892, McVitie's. So Scaphio and Phantis, our villains, are aghast at the changes in society, not really because they're displeased with how it's going, but more that they have lost their power over the king, and they plot to bring him down. Then we have a romantic subplot with two of the Flowers of Progress pursuing the younger daughters, and telling the younger daughters that Lady Sophy has it all wrong. English girls don't have to follow any of these musty, fusty rules. They're actually quite free and noble and brave. So then we have Lady Sophy's 11 o'clock number. So Lady Sophy has a lot of romantic hang-ups when it comes to monarchs, as she explains. And she is devastated that she can't be with the king because of the things written in the palace peeper. But the king is hiding behind a bush and hears this and comes out and says, "No, I am the one who wrote the palace peeper." And that changes everything for her. So now I'd love to sing for you the second act duet between the Lady Sophy and the King Paramount. "Oh, Rapture Unrestrained." Yes. I think it's on. It's green. Boop. And ba-doop, ba-doop, ba-doo. Do excuse me.
181.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Ah, Lady Sophy, then you love me, or so you sing.
No, no, by the stars that shine above me, degraded king. For while these rumors through the city bruited remain uncontradicted, unrefuted, the object thou of my aversion rooted, repulsive thing.
Be just, the time is now at hand when truth may published be. These paragraphs were written and contributed by me.
By you? No, no.
Yes, yes, I swear, by me. I, caught in Scaphio's ruthless toil, contributed a lot.
Why you did not boil the author on the spot.
And that is why I did not boil the author on the spot.
I couldn't think why you did not boil the author on the spot.
I knew very well what I didn't
Boil him
on the spot.
Oh, raptured, unrestrained of a candid retractation, for my sovereign has deigned a convincing explanation, and the clouds that gathered o'er all have vanished in the distance, and of kings of fairy lore one at least is in existence. Of kings of fairy lore one at least is in existence.
Oh, the skies are blue above, and the earth is red in rosal. Now the lady of my love has accepted my proposal. For the Ansinorum ponds I have crossed without assistance, and the prudish paragons, one at least is in existence. Oh, prudish paragons, one at least is in existence.
The clouds that gathered over have vanished in the distance. All have vanished, all have vanished, all have vanished in the distance.
And then we dance.
And then we dance. Thank you. So yes, then we dance, and in fact, all these romantic subplots are resolved through dance, as we have a wild tarantella with the Flowers of Progress and their younger daughters, and Fitzbattle Axe and Princess Sarah and the King and Sophy. They dance it out. And then we come to the finale of the piece, where the Utopians, the Utopian people, are furious. They hate the Flowers of Progress. Now, down with the Flowers of Progress, they say, because the changes in their society have led to such perfection that everybody's out of a job. So Zara has forgotten one crucial element of British society that will put everything to rights, and I think I'm going to leave it to the show to unveil what that is, and it's a great joke. Unsurprisingly. So, let's talk a little bit about the humor of this show. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a very satirical piece, right? The Flowers of Progress are a broad satire of British society. And it uses, much like the Mikado uses Japan as this, sort of fantasy place from which to skewer Britain, so does Utopia Limited with this unnamed South Pacific Isle, but it's really a lens at British society. And it is lampooning the effects of British imperialism. There's also a number of references to other GNS shows, which, I found really fun to sort of discover in the script, but also I think works better now than it did probably at the premiere of this piece, because we have the benefit of recorded CDs, right, and media where we can get really intimately familiar with all these pieces and catch all these references. So we have Captain Corcoran reappearing from HMS Pinafore. The boil him on the spot bit refers to an earlier part where the king says that he is consulting with the Mikado of Japan to come up with suitable punishments for whoever's riding the palace peeper. We also have some fun topical references of the day. As I mentioned, the biscuits earlier. The younger daughter's number talks about Kodak cameras, which were a very new invention at the time. So it's sort of like, Gilbert mentioned the telephone in HMS Pinafore. He's very up to date with his references. And then we have really a shocking number of comedic dance sequences where we are expressing our feelings through dance, and the other characters trying to understand our meaning. This happens with Scaphio, Phantis, the King, Lady Sophy. I'm really looking forward to blocking what is called my dance of repudiation directed towards the King. We'll see. And the music of the show is split pretty, maybe even evenly, between songs that advance the plot and then songs that really point the satire. And I think I really enjoy a lot of the numbers that point the satire, like Mr. Goldberry's number talking about limited liability companies, even my number, Bold-Faced Ranger, which is talking about, these very musty, fusty courtship rituals. The chorus has the duty often of introducing characters. So there's a lot of grand fanfares and great choruses to look forward to. And pretty uniquely, there's a piece called Eagle High, which is only the second and one of two a cappella choruses in GNS. You may remember that the first one is in Pirates of Penzance, Hail Poetry. So Eagle High is the other of the a cappella choruses of GNS. And I think it has I think it takes itself a little more seriously than Hail Poetry does. Sort of has some shades of, Sullivan wrote hymns in the Anglican Church. It's almost got that kind of hymnody feel to it, I think. And interestingly enough, Utopia is the only GNS opera which doesn't end with a reprise. So we have fresh music at the end, although very catchy, in my opinion. And then I'd like to invite all three of these beautiful baritones up to perform First You're Born, which is one of the pointing the satire numbers of this show. So if we had in the Mikado pity sing saying that life's a joke that's just begun, then I think this song brings us to the logical conclusion that you live your life and at the end, the joke is over.
Boo. I think the song is great because I haven't talked too much to James about this yet, but I really think this number is the king talking about his own life. We never really find out what happened to his first wife, but I think we have a little bit of a clue in here, and I'll see if you can hear that. But what I love about the king is no matter his life is just turned upside down, but he always likes to look on the humorous side of things. It's wonderful, so here we go. First you're born and I'll be bound find a dozen strangers around you. Hello, cries the newborn baby. Where's my parents? Which may they be? Awkward silence, no reply. Puzzled baby wonders why. Father rises, bows politely. Mother smiles, but not too brightly. Doctor mumbles like a dumb thing. Nurse is busy mixing something. Every symptom seems to show you're decidedly de trop. Times teetotum, if you spin it, gives its quotum once a minute. I'll go bail, you'll hit the nail, and if you fail, the deuce is in it. You grow up and you'll discover what it is to be a lover. Some young lady is selected, poor perhaps, but well-connected, whom you hail, for love is blind, as the queen of fairy kind. Though she's plain, perhaps unsightly, makes her face up, laces tightly. In her form your fancy traces all the grifts of all the graces. Rivals none the maiden woo, so you take her and she takes you. Jokes beginning never ceases till your inning time releases. On your way you blindly stray, and day by day the joke increases. 10 years later time progresses, sours your temper, thins your tresses. Fancy then her chain relaxes, rates are facts and so are taxes. Fairy queen's no longer young, fairy queen has got a tongue. Twins have probably intruded quite unbidden, just as you did. They're the source of care and trouble, just as you were only double. Comes at last a final stroke, time has had its little joke. Daily driven wife is drover, ill your thriven ne'er in clover. Lastly then 10. And not till then the joke is over. Daily driven wife is drover, ill your thriven ne'er in clover. Lastly then 10. And not till then the joke is over.
And I realized I would be remiss if I did not thank our wonderful pianist for this afternoon, Christopher Zander, who's helped us out here. Yeah, he's wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about our production of Utopia Limited. I can talk first, and then I'll hand it over to our director. Your class. It's my class. So as I mentioned earlier, sort of like the Mikado, the original setting is but a jumping off point for Gilbert to make fun of British society. And in Utopia Limited, I think the exoticizations are even less. There's really not almost any melody that would be recognizable as of a South Pacific island. There's not really any references that the only thing is that there's the utopian language that the king has outlawed, and that is originally some gibberish. But in our production, it's actually going to be Latin translations of other lines from GNS, which I think is kind of a fun Easter egg. I don't know if any of you speak Latin, you might be able to catch it, or talk to one of our performers.
Some of our performers and our pianist, rehearsal pianist Elizabeth Rogers has already caught on to whose lines they are.
So yeah, it's sort of set in this non-specific temperate climate. And our costumes are going to be set firmly when the show came out in 1893. But the Utopians are going to have, costumes of that time period, British costumes, but in very bright colors, as opposed to the British, who are going to have these darker colors of the Industrial Revolution, sort of highlighting that contrast between them. And I wanted to mention that the costumes are being done by Quinto Ott, who did the new Pirates of Penzance costumes and also the new Mikado costumes. And he's also a performer with the company, so he's a multi-talented gentleman, and I'm really looking forward to my costume fitting. Although I suppose Lady Sophie's going to be in black, Deep blue. Oh, I look so good in blue. And yeah, we feel that this is really timely satire. I was talking about the corporations in particular, right? In this age where capitalism is before all, and we're really taking a barb at that, which I appreciate. And I also think that there's great excitement in the company. So frequently we are putting on productions that we already know pretty well and love, but kind of resurrecting our old favorites. And so there's a real novelty to discovering a work for me for the first time, for many of us for the first time, and putting it on its feet and getting to make all these choices and figure out who these characters are and where we are and what we're doing. And I'm just really enjoying, as James said, we've just started the process of rehearsals, but I am having a really wonderful time, and James is a fantastic director. So I think you have a lot to look forward to. James, would you like to talk a little bit about your vision for the production?
Sure. Yes. It is very, very rare in a repertory company like ours that we do have this opportunity, like we took with the Mikado several years ago, and that is to take something, in this case, a diamond in the rough. There is so much to love about this show. It's a lot of dialogue, and I think that can kind of get to you. It's like, Shakespeare. It takes a good 10, 15 minutes sometimes to settle in, and I feel like Gilbert and Sullivan can be like that too. But what we're doing with this production is we're giving it this, living legacy and vitality. We're pumping it full of our mission statement and lots of exciting talent, and there's new people to the company that are really discovering it for the first time. And our goal is that this eventually becomes part of our rep. It's been 15 years since we even did it in concert. And this, as I said, will be the first time it's fully staged. The orchestra will be in the pit where they belong. And and like the Gondoliers and the Sorcerer and some of the other shows that don't come around as much, we're really hoping that Utopia is going to have the popularity to jump right in there with them and be part of our rotating rep of shows. It already feels really exciting. We have put together some pretty long sequences. The sequence that Hannah's number, Bold-Faced Ranger, is part of 4 distinctly different songs that are all tied together in one sequence. It's about 13 minutes long. And we did it the other night and just sort of surprised ourselves how exciting it felt. And then Friday night, yes, just 2 days ago, we finished the Act 1 finale, and that is a 20-minute long sequence. It's 41 pages in here. And everyone knows that Iolanthe has a long Act 1 finale, but this one rivals it, and it's very exciting. So, there's so much I could talk about, but particularly timely. What's interesting about this is you mentioned it's sort of a British colonization satire, and for me, I've always seen it as it's the reverse colonization. Britain was famous for taking over the world, and that wasn't always a good thing. To the British, it was one of their points of pride. The sun never sets on the British Empire. But the damage it caused is still being felt today. And I think it's particularly interesting in a time when, let's say, like places like Greenland are up for sale. There's this idea that a powerful country that's already great is seeking foreign influence to become greater. And that's exactly what the king of Utopia is doing. Utopia is its namesake. It's already perfect. It's an advanced society. They have theater. They have newspapers. They have a Supreme Court. It's not a primitive society at all. But they see England as that beacon of light that is the pinnacle of success. And they welcome it in with open arms. And that is what changes Utopia and leads the people to practically having a revolution. They're so unhappy by the end of the show because their world has been utterly shaken. And I just think that we're living in a time right now where that's really relatable. And to be able to escape it for, 2.5 hours with a lush, the largest orchestra in a theatrical performance that you can go to in New York these days, and beautiful costumes and dance, so much dance, and some of the best singers and actors I've ever worked with. I just think it's a really welcoming moment for us to have this right now. And that's the way I feel about it.
Well spoke, well spoke. And I did want to mention a couple of my sources, just because if you're interested in learning more, you might want to seek them out. I got a lot of great information from gsarchive.net, which is, so much of the internet is bots, right? This is real people talking about GNS. It's a repository of libretti and scores, and there was this really wonderful transcript of a lengthy discussion between GNS scholars about Utopia Limited that you can find on there, and they go in detail into every facet. And it's also really interesting how mixed their opinions are. One will say, oh, this was my favorite number. Oh, I hate that number, but I love this one. And it's just, I'm excited also to see what you all think of the show, And also, some of the pictures I used early on were from the Victoria and Albert Archive online, which was a wonderful resource. They have on their online database, they've scanned every of the original costume drawings that Percy Anderson created for the original Utopia, and I thought it was so neat, and it also showed me why it was so expensive. I featured only a few of them, but there were many, many elaborate costumes, and that was pretty neat to look at. And now we come to the question and answer portion of our program. If you have any questions for me or James, or if they'll permit it, any of our actors, no forcing. Yeah.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is a wonderful introduction to Utopia Limited. I just have a question. Given that even the Mikado, you got, of course, the famous I've got you list, and it's adapted every time to fit with what's going on in the world. Have you changed any of the libretto to suit what's going on right now?
Yes, the question is, have we changed any of the libretto to sort of contemporize it? We have changed a few things that specifically reference the South Pacific island. It's like 2 or 3 times in the show. It's so insignificant that it felt worthy of making this even more of just an island in a temperate area that's not specific to a region. And I think it's working beautifully so far. And as Hannah mentioned, we've taken the nonsense sort of baby talk language of Utopia, and we've translated it to Latin, because I'm being inspired by a lot of the lines in the dialogue, and the women, when they're welcoming Zara back from Girton, they want to be fed on calculus. They're rabid for all of this knowledge she brings, and they ask her to teach them all about languages alive and dead. And when I read that, I thought, oh, that's interesting. And they reference, quaff the nectar and the lyre and the lute. There's all this Grecian and Mediterranean referencing. There's nothing that references the South Pacific. So it was very easy to just drag it and drop it into a place that is not looked through a lens of exoticism. And that's what we did with the Mikado, too, to tremendous success. So I wouldn't say that we've done too much updating as far as like little jabs to what's going on, because as I said, I think it's already in there. There's a lot that the lines, as Gilbert wrote them, make more sense now than they probably have in 150 years. Well, not that many, a little over 100 years. But thank you for that question. Great question.
Anybody else? Anything you'd like to know about Utopia Limited, about our... and Danny's going to give you a microphone just so our audience online
A
can.
question, but a comment about the song First You're Born. I think that's a very bitter song. It's not really funny. And
The thing about the king that is interesting is even though he lives a very bitter existence, he continuously says in the dialogue, "Oh, I like to always look on the humorous side of things," even though, you know, his life is not really in his control. But I agree with you absolutely.
I almost said this earlier, but Gilbert does this at least one other time, where he is telling the story of the character in a metaphorical way, or in by proxy. And can anyone think of the song? It's a very popular song that Gilbert does this with. I have a song to sing-o in the Yeoman of the Guard. It is Jack Point's story. And when I play that role, I like to think of it as he has written this song about the life he wants. And then by the end of the show, the lyrics change to reflect the life he has. So it's very similar to this number. Very great question, or great comment, I should say.
Anybody else? Anything else? Yeah, Anne. Oh, wait for the mic.
You haven't said anything about the sets.
Oh, yes. I think James will talk about the sets.
Well, I am thrilled to be bringing into our creative fold a very good friend of mine who I've worked with for over 10 years. His name is Joshua Warner. He has an incredibly long and really impressive resume. I met him at the College Light Opera Company in 2016, and he designed my set for the Yeoman of the Guard, and my jaw hit the floor when I walked into the theater to see it. He's just a great guy. He's a big fan of our company, and he is designing with me a very interesting set that has it has direct inspiration of European and Victorian architecture, but it's a form meets function where the architecture and nature look like they're in harmony with one another. And that's not necessarily what you see in England. You see nature in opposition with architecture. So there is an untamed natural beauty to what we see in the King's Palm Court, but it isn't literally a palm court. It's inspired by one in a way that I think you'll find very interesting when the curtain comes up. And by Act 2, as the country's becoming anglicized, well, the untamed, beautiful, flowering bush is now a very trimmed down boxwood topiary. So we're finding ways to show sort of subtly how the colonization is changing Utopia, and not for the better. So I'm excited to see how the set comes together. We are in the finalization of it right now. You know, we're putting up a new production in 6 months. So there's a lot going on all at once, and I'm very excited to see how it turns out.
Thank you.
I'm surprised you didn't mention a lot of people's favorite number from this opera, which is the musical, The Seven Flowers of Progress, with the tambourines. You didn't talk about that one at all.
Well, so we're changing it from the parody of the minstrel number to the music hall number parody, and James can talk more.
Yeah, no, I was mentioning that that was part of the lens that we're looking at it now, and taking sort of the more inappropriate or archaic thinking out of the number. The number is intact. We haven't changed a single word, and we're presenting it rather than musicians in chairs as actual music hall performers with straw boaters and canes, bamboo canes, and it's going to be very exciting. It has not been staged yet. Every number you saw today has not been staged yet, which is a testament to how much homework these brilliant actors have done on their own. We've been, this is something I could tell you if you're just interested, the way we approach things, the way I approach things here at NYGASP and at College Light Opera, where I work in the summers, is you work big to small. It's very crucial that the larger numbers of people, the big ensembles, get exposed to the material right away. So we work on the finales, we work on the big sequences that involve all the choruses and some principals. And right now, the calendar's not terribly in our favor. We just got back from tour of the Mikado. We have a performance of the Mikado in Morristown next Friday. Hey, New Jersey. You'll be watching this on live stream while we're doing the Mikado at the Mayo Center, but a lot of the folks here are actually going to come see us at the Mayo Center. Anyway, we also go into Holy Week very soon, and many of our singers have church jobs. So that starts to become difficult to get 30 people together in one room. So we're starting big. We've done these big sequences, and now these smaller numbers we're going to start to fit in as the calendar gets a little bit more complicated. And then after Passover and Easter, in the week that becomes production week, we sew it all back together. So that's a little bit about our process behind the scenes. But yes, that number will be in the show for you, just as it always has been.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice? Okay. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. Thank you to our performers, our accompanist, and to Danny Bristoll, who's filming for later broadcasts. So if you want to watch it again, we're going to be sending out a video link so everybody can learn about Utopia Limited before they go and see the show. You can share it with your friends. And thank you to James also for being here. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.